Oh, it's a nice, peaceful Sunday morning, and I thought I might get a little bit of work done on this front hub. Let's get it back together again. So it's the front left-hand hub. I took it apart really because of the aforementioned reasons, which were largely there was a woeful lack of gaskets in favour of a gasket sealant. It was a gasket sealant rather than silicone sealant, but also I didn't get the feeling that the preload, the preload was correct on this. Replace the sweep seal, I'll replace the gaskets, I'll reassemble it, I'll just basically give it an overhaul, and I'll go through very briefly, just go through the process. What I would do on this shouldn't take more than a very short period of time. You see the bench is reasonably organised. I do clear up after every job, and I know there's people out there that say I've got a messy workshop, and do you know what? I've got a messy workshop. I can't help that. I've got plans for it, and it will be a lot better. So excuse the scratching noises, that's horrible, isn't it? That's like, I used to drive my brother up the wall when we went to the seaside, and I dragged my metal spade along the concrete as we were going down towards the beach. I used to drive my brother up the wall. God, he went nuts. I'm sure he'll get his own back on me. Well, he has done frequently. Right, there's quite a lot of crap and detritus around this surface, so it really just needs cleaning up. I'm so pleased I rescued this bench from Devon. My intention was just to leave it down there, but because it's going to be a faff bringing it up, but I'm pleased I did. Right, okay, I think really the first thing I would do on this, before I go too far, I'm not going to bother taking out the bottom swivel pin because there's no sign of any wear on it. They very rarely wear. They're normally good. There's a couple of things that I would be inclined to do though, and the first of those is to make sure that the drain and the fill plugs come out. So it's going to need a 6-sided socket on that. And that, let's see, that someone banged the lock tab up, but they haven't actually banged it up to hold the nut. Never mind, we can just check the torque on those. That's not a problem. That is the least of our worries here. Now, what have I done with my blue socket set box? This is going to be the issue we've got now, is that I've had to tidy up and then can't fucking find anything. That's my scrap metal bin for the desk. I just lob all the scrap metal in there. In fact, that's scrap. See, there's no thread on that. Scrap. This is kind of just part of the plan really for moving this in the right sort of direction. That's a filing box over there. Blue socket set, Richard. For fuck's sake. Tools together, Richard, it always helps. Right, okay, so the only reason I do these now is because I want to make sure that everything is going to be serviceable on this hub once it goes back together again. And there's nothing more irritating than putting it all back together again and finding you can't get the fill plug out and it needs a bit of heat. And you think, ah, you bastard. So it's just a fairly straightforward case of being a bit organised. So that plug is fine. I might be inclined to unpaint the washer from it and replace the washer, but that's fine. There's a lot of crap and detritus, it's a good word today, Richard, around this hole, including some sort of silicone or gasket, I don't know. Right, so that's helps. I don't bother with that one. That's kind of a level sensor. I don't worry about that because generally I fill these things up from empty. This thing is always a bastard to get out, so I tend to leave it. And then you've got a 1/2 inch spanner, as opposed to a big spanner, which is what I am. Oh, it does undo. It's just tight. It's been painted basically. Now, these are fairly standard plugs. There's nothing nasty about it. you can get these brand spanking new. So if the top end of this thing is being chewed up, the first thing you would do is put a big nut over the top of it and weld the nut on. But once it's out, replace it with a new one. Just makes the next person's job just a tinsy bit easier. Right, the next thing I generally do is clean all the threads out. So I just chase the threads using my marvellous Talco. So basically what I've done with this now, because I've got 2 of these, every time I see one at bargain price I buy another one, because these, you can spend a fortune on taps and dies, but when you're only chasing threads, you just want something that's accurate. Now, some of the more modern kits, the Chinesium, I tend not to find them that accurate, so I tend to buy the old school stuff. I tend to buy taps and dies where I possibly can that are sort of hobbyist, but they work. I can spend a small fortune, but I'm trying to do this not on a budget, but just do it so you guys can see really what the benefit is in it. Now, because I've put I've got 2 of these sets. I've put this entire box is now Imperial. That's why it's got an eye on the top, and the other box is entirely metric. And then you've got the luxury then of being able to chop the tip off one of the taps, which would normally look like that. That one's not been cleaned, Richard. Heathen. So they'd normally look like that, and I chop the tip off. It becomes a bottom tap for now. But they're very, very, very good then for just chasing a hole. And then every now and then I go along to an antique fair and I find a gem like this. And you think, oh, picked it up for about £3. So it's well worth looking around. You ever go to an antique fair or a trade fair, rummage around the boxes full of old spoons and forks and stuff, because you will find stuff like this and then haggle. And you see that's gone in nice and deep, far deeper than the bolt would go. But the idea is just to clean the thread out so that when your new fixing goes in there, it's not going to give you false torque settings. It is going to, go right in. It's not full of crap. But each time you put the tap out, you just need a toothbrush. It's the wife's. Actually, I think James gets these. James does a lot of work where he stays away from home, and he feels like he needs to steal the toothbrushes which are provided in these fancy hotels, so he's got thousands of them, so he gives them to me. Thank you, James. It's a nice backstory too. Right, and then sometimes these things, because I've chopped the end of the tap off, getting it started can be an issue. See, that was already a bit on the tight side, so there's some crap in that hole. Might have been cross-threaded, you see, you never know. Now these ones on the back here, these are dead easy. The ones where I would really need to put my effort into these are the brake caliper holes. That's as nice as I'd expect that. Brake caliper holes, bolt holes, but also the hole for the bump stop, the adjuster, the steering lock adjuster. I suppose I could have made my life easier just by chamfering a little edge on this so I could make it so it would go in. It's probably easier to put the tab in and then put the handle on. There we are. As you can see, it's a worthwhile exercise. And all of these on the hubs, I believe, are all UNF. If you get a tight spot, don't push it, because you'll just break the tap and then you'll be swearing at it. Because these things are hardened steel, and when they break and they're trapped inside the thread, they become a bastard to get out. That's nice. There's quite a lot of shit in that hole for now. I don't use any cutting compound or anything on this. There's enough lubrication on this that I can just whiz it in. Don't think it's got any straights. And this really is quite a satisfying job to do on a Sunday bloody morning. Chunter, 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 chunter. That's crossed. There we go. there. And there. Going in, obviously I don't want to be damaging these threads in any way because these are safety fucking critical, these ones. So I just want to be sure that I am going in and not damaging anything. That's going in a lot easier, that one. The other one didn't really want to go in too far, so I might just have to get a caliper bolt. The other problem you'll notice here is that we're running out of space here, because the tap isn't quite long enough. And I've broken my ratchet, both of my ratchet tap holders. Right, now we've started both those threads. Let's go and get a bolts. Right, one thing that did worry me, by the way, on this was when I pulled it all apart, there was some rusty residue, quite hard deposits on the back of the sweep seals, and none of that really has gone into the hub, but it is in the axle casing. So I drained the oil out of the axle, and I'll just need to put that in a clear container and see how much water was in the axle, because obviously the oil will float on the oil. The oil will float on the water. The oil will float on the oil. You fucking dick. So yes. Right, let's get a bit of cardboard. That bit down there will do nicely. Because then we're not going to be picking up more dirt and grit and crap. I wouldn't mind just double checking the torque on these. I mean, if they're tight, they're tight. The bottom one, for now, doesn't make quite so much of a issue. It's not quite so much of an issue. Fuck you. As the top one. The top one has obviously got all the preload of the bearing and so forth on it. But yeah, they want to be done up. You don't want to be messing around. Let's do these up. Put them away. They can go over there. Now, quick clear up. See, I do it. I don't need to change the bearings on this, I don't think. Right, so let's, first and foremost, I'm not abusing my socket. I'm just moving the locking tab out of the way. And then see if these undo. They do, they're not tight at all. So I might take this pin off and just check there's a gasket underneath it. I wouldn't normally, but then because there's no way it's that tight. So again, another good reason for ripping these things apart. I'm just being absolutely sure that it's gone back together properly. This bracket down here, that's to hold the bottom half of the brake back plate on. So all I'm going to do here is pull this apart. This swivel pin does look relatively recent. I suspect owner, before current owner, did do some work and overhaul these axles. There's a fair chance that they just got lobbed back together. I don't know, I really don't. And this is, like I've said it a couple of times now, but this is the problem that you're going to face with a half-done project. That you have to really take everything apart in order to find out what has been done and what hasn't been done. These bolts come 8 face. I won't bother tasting these threads because they're actually pretty clean already. I might just clean the bolts up. They're looking in good order. And then no gasket. Or is that a gasket? Oh, sorry, I do apologise, there is a gasket, look at that. So there is a gasket, so we'll replace that chappy. Just scrape that off there. So this just really needs reassembling. New gasket, bit of thread lock on the bolts. Not acres, folks, just a bit, just a dab. Clean everything up, put it back together. Oh yeah, that's all right. That is all right. That is all right. And that will fight to see that you can get these new again, by the way. They've started supplying them again. Because it did get to a stage where you had to make them out of a sheet of steel. But no, being available again is good news. Right, let me find some gaskets and bits. Got the box of gaskets. You see, there's a fair few in stock. That's one of them. That's ABS one. Oh, there's more there. That's probably the ones I want. Shims, I'm definitely going to need the shims. So let's pop that over here. And then try these ones first of all. I mean, if this doesn't fit, I'll just double check the part number against blah blah blah. I'd say that fits beautifully. Look at that. So that part number was 571815. So that's done that. I don't know what that one is in there. I think that's probably, because the holes are smaller for the bolt holes, I think that's probably the ABS one. Don't know. Don't need to know. You can go back in the box. Can it? Eh? Oh yes. Now, the only other thing I'll do with this is I'll brush some well seal on before it goes in. It just gives the... Don't know why you did that. Gives the bearing a fighting chance. Clean everything out so it's all grease free, and then pop that in. Stuff. It really does fuck up your hands. Not fuck them up, it stains them. Kind of like you're going out for dinner with the wife's posh friends and you look like a navvy. It's not a good look. And then she moans like hell that I haven't had a shave. Have you seen the state of your hands, darling? There you go. So this stuff, sticky paintbrush. You don't have to buy it in great big tins like this. You can probably get it in much smaller containers, but because I use it quite a lot, I tend to buy it in reasonable quantities. There we go. Monsieur the gasket. And you're going to stay there? You're thinking about it. We'll brush a bit on here. I think with any of these things, it probably is solvent based, I don't know. But just let it go off a little bit. There's the old gasket, can go in the rubbish. That can go back on there and over there, so it's out of the way. Then I can take these fucking things off now, you see. I know you should wear gloves when you're working on cars, folks, but it can be a ball's ache sometimes. Right, now let's pop this back in. That goes down. There we go. We'll put the retainer on. We'll put the bolt back in. Going nicely. I mean, to torque these up to, I can't remember what it was now. Let me just go and check the manual. Something about 65 foot-pounds or something along those lines. 60 foot-pounds. Mr. Norbar, 60 foot-pounds, about 80 newton meters. In fact, it looks like 82 newton meters. Just go and double check that against the later cars. Swivel pin, lower swivel pin to swivel pin housing, 78 Newton meter. So we go back, still says 60 on here, 78, there you go. I'll just wake the torque wrench up because all I do here is put it in a vise. Just double check and I'm happy with it. And then we can torque these bastards up. When you're torquing, push down with the palm of your hand, not your fingers around the outside, because if it comes off and your fingers go against the bench, you're going to shout. Like that, see? What I might do is I'm going to put 6-headed bolts. These Draper bolts, stud, they're really good, but they're multi-pointed, so I'll just get, I've really got that fucking black stag weld seal all over my hands, look. Now, stop pissing around, get on with this, move the blade out of the way, because otherwise we know what will happen. On. I've done both of those. Beautiful, just fucking beautiful. Now, of course, having done that, just bend the lock tab back up and bend the flat of the nut. That's that done. It's the bottom swivel pin done. Okie doke. Now we can put the bearing on there, but before I put the bearing on there, just do a quick visual on it. Make sure it's not crushed. Make sure it's not a Coke 5000. MNRE, that's OE kind of. No signs of any physical damage to that whatsoever. Pop him in. I kept him clean since I disassembled, so we're going to be all right there. Next we need to put the swivel housing in the correct way up, folks. So basically when the swivel housing goes in, the axle side of the swivel housing wants to be parallel with the stub axle housing on the front there, because you can put it the wrong way up like that on these early cars and end up with an alarming amount of caster. Just bear that in mind. Both these seats are in good order. I think they're new. They're both seated correctly, so they've gone in as far as they're going to go. When you're putting these in, by the way, tap them in using an old bearing and an old swivel pin. It's the easiest way of doing it. Now, what I'll do is I will check the top bearing. Make sure it's got no signs of damage, because the driver's side was damaged. Oh, this one's a Timken, made in England. Beautiful. No signs of any damage. Got a nice fluid feel to it. That's good. Pop that into the housing. Pop the housing into the car. These are the shims that were in it when I took it apart. So this is the best place to start. What I need to do, just scrape old crap, sealant, etc. off the shims. Something there, probably paint, but I don't want it to interfere in any way with the readings. I don't want to be getting false positives, if you get my drift, where the torque is that one or two shims? That's one shim. Where the torque is being affected because there's paint in the way. When you're painting these things, do it the army way, i.e. fully assembled, then paint. Right, and we'll put those two on there. I'll just check that's in good order. Just check it for wear. It's a used pin, but I can't see any real wear on it. So we'll use it again. Put the 2 original chappies in there. Locate. Oh, it was 2. Look at that. I've got 3 shims on here. I thought it was 2. Just fell apart. Position that in. That's in. And then I'm not going to worry too much about all of the brake housing and everything else. I'm just going to use the bolts. In fact, what's going on with these bolts? These bolts should just fall out of here. Looks like the lock tab is a bit on the tight side. Might just need to drill the lock tab out or clean it out, chase it out. Because again, on the top swivel pin, although you do them up, there is a lock tab on here which is painted on by those things. There it goes, painted on. Lock tab, brake pipe housing. So I just want the bolts at the moment. These do up to 60 foot-pounds, sorry, 78 Newton meters. 65, what was I fucking talking about, boy? I don't know, fucking chunter. Oh, it's easier to work that way round, just because. When you're doing this, you do it without the sweep seal. Without the sweep seal. Once it's done, then you can put the sweep seal on. Okay. Right, now we've done that. That feels lumpy now, so I'm going to suggest that this is too tight. It's got just a lumpy feel to it. So it's almost like the bearings, bearings are under too much load. So I'm going to say it probably needs another shim putting underneath there, but we can double check with the trusty spring balance. Oh. God, I need to tie this fucking workshop off. Salters, pocket balance. Oh yes. We're working here and here. That's good, right? Okay, so put him right down and lift. Yeah, we're way over the top, so I'm going to add a shim into that. That's too tight. So let's undo those. I could do with Mr. Windy, really. Windy. So at least it saves time. They're out. They're out. Now, let's see what shims we've got in here, first of all. So that can go there. That can come out. You know when these pins are warm, by the way, because they're a bastard to pull out. So that is the top tip. So these things, they normally come in 2 or 3 different thicknesses. So I've got 2 thin ones and 2 medium ones. Let's go into the back. It's probably what I want to do is add a thin one in. There's a thin one there. So we'll put a 3rd thin one in. It is, unfortunately, it's hit and miss. It really is kind of a case of faffing around until you get it right. Which is why it's easier doing it on the bench than on the car. I mean, obviously, if it's on the car, you can do it. It is achievable, but it's just a lot easier doing this on the bench. not going right the way up to the torque setting there. Right, let's have it over. Torque these back down again. Already that feels smoother. There's less load on it. You know, when you do a wheel bearing, we do a cone bearing up too tight, it feels look when you're kind of trying to. You do that again, Richard. Yeah, it just feels odd. You can feel it's odd. Right, so let's go Mr. Spring Balance again. Where are you? There. I'll put a handy red dot on there between 3 and 4. Right. I say that's 5. So it could do with another shim still. It's heading in the right direction though. So one more shim. Now you could fuck around and start reducing the overall number of shims, and sort of rather than putting a tiny shim in, put a thicker shim in. But well, we'll see what happens. There you go. That comes ice. That's the new shim I just, sorry, that wasn't the new shim. That was the new shim I just put in there, a thin one. So let's take 2 thin ones, 3 thin ones, thin. I've got thousands of thin ones. I'm just going to put another thin one in, because the alternative is you go for the next thickness up and replace it with the 2 thin ones. But I'm just going to add another thin one. So I'll put 2 thin ones in. They're about £1 each, these shims. They're not the end of the world. As you can see, I've got a few of them. Because there's nothing worse when doing a job like this than to realise, oh shit, I need another shim. And there's no way of doing it without actually putting the shims in there. Right, so let's pop you there. You go up and up and over. That feels nice, that does. Right, so come out and overcome initial resistance, and we are now just a smidge over £4. Just a smidge. So let me do that again. I'd say that's absolutely bang on actually. I'd say that's £4. So I've added 2 tight shims in there, and the difference in the feeling of that steering now is marked. It's unbelievable. It's got a really, really nice, smooth feeling to it. There's no nastiness at all. So having done that, of course, now we're going to need to take the 2 bolts off, put the lock tab and the brake piece back at the top again. And then we can do sweep seal. Fucking stupid boy. Yeah, let's do the sweep seal. So I keep myself, I'm stuck in the workshop on my own. I mean, you've got to entertain yourself somehow, haven't you? This is not for your benefit, this is for my benefit. I've decided it's the case on my phone that keeps, it's not a case on my phone, case on my camera that keeps stopping recording, and God, it must be just a bit grubby or just worn out, plain worn out. Whoops, sorry. Right. Those 2 are off. That goes on. What I will do, just because it will get painted once it's all together, I'll just put a bit of copper grease in between those 2. It's not going to affect any torque settings, but it will slow down the rust. Ba, 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 ba. That's the right way around, isn't it? Yes, that's the right way around. Then we need a sweep seal. Now, fortunately on this side, the sweep seal retainer was not cut. On the other side, it was chopped into little bits and then kind of overlaid in order to make it fit. But on this side, it's in good order. So we'll reuse the sweep seal. Sorry, reuse the sweep seal retainer. Now, I might have made my life a bit difficult there. Might have made my life a bit difficult there. Where's my knackered screwdriver? No, that's fine. Done that one. And done that one. Right, so lock tabs on. Beautiful, just fucking beautiful. Now, next we need, old gasket, bin. Next we need a sweep seal. One lovely, sweet looking, beautiful sweep seal. Oh, that's nice. That is nice. Now, holds down with the retainer. I tend not to put loads of gloop and stuff around the outside of them. I don't generally find they leak. The sweep seal, when it's pushed down, really should bed down quite hard against the lip on the inside there, and it has got rubber around it. Some people put lots of sealant around the edges here. I don't know. I tend to find that once that's down, that ain't going to leak. It's a double lip sweep seal as well. Now, is that going to work? So the next thing we've got is the retainer. Now the retainer actually only goes on in one direction, which you have to keep rotating it until you find the holes are right. There is a little cutout, and it does match up with the little cutout for the disc. So that then goes on top of the sweep seal, and then we've got all of the bolts, which are all serviceable on this. Now these don't do up particularly tight, so I'm inclined to use just a smeg of thread lock on these. If I had to replace all of these, then fine, I could probably get that sorted out. But yeah, I think that's going to hold. Let me just put two of these in, because I really want to just double check that I'm not going to be in a position where this sweep seal does need something around the outside of it. I'd say that's good. I think once that's all kind of fixed down, it's going to be exactly what I want. So what have we got here? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bolts. All in good order, all of the heads are good, blah de blah de blah, thread lock. I know they've got lock washers on them as well, but because these things do up to Land Rover 4 torque, God knows what torque, it will be stupidly low. They're only 1/4 inch bolts, so you're not going to go berserk with them, are you? No, Richard, you're not. Don't do any of them up tight until you've got them fucking busted. All of them in. No, I just dropped all the washers in there. Now, the washers have got a... Right, the other thing I need to do with this is I need to put in the axle, the half shaft seal that goes in the bottom of the swivel ball. That's the one we took out. Compare it against the one that we're going to put back in again, same size. This one is an OEM V8 axle shaft bearing 571718G. It's got a G on the end there. It stands for good as opposed to shit. Right, there we go, that goes on there. Pretty much push that bastard down, and then a block of wood on the top, and I should just tap that in. No, I'm going to have to go and get the drifts and put that in properly so it goes right the way down. And then the drive shaft, this basically slows the feed of oil from the half shaft, differential half shaft, into the hub and vice versa. That's all that does. So that's that. That's more or less ready to go back on now. Happy with that. Right, the CV joint. Obviously I've got no understanding of the history of this device. I wasn't able to road test it. So really all I'm going to do here is withdraw one of the balls. If I can get one of the balls out, which is looking likely, then I can check the state of wear. So what you really want to do, rotate the whole cage right way around. You've got the inner cage, the outer cage, the bearing or ball retainer. And really, once it gets around to not far off this point, I should be able to extract one of these balls. Might need a flat blade in there, Richard. As far as it will go, and then in here, and this ball is going to come out, and it's out. Right, so let's have a look at the ball first of all, because that's the first thing I want to check. The ball looks new. The next thing I want to check is the track that the ball goes into. And what can we see? Can't see anywhere. There is somewhere. It's somewhere. Right, okay, so somewhere. Let me, over the rainbow, let me just clean this up a little bit, and I shall bring you in for a closer look. Because I think it's got life left in it. It's not the end of the world if we get it into service and we find out it clonks, because they're relatively easy to change. But basically what I'm doing is I'm looking here on the inner cage, and you can see where the ball has worn itself a very, very, very light groove. Barely perceptible. You can see the wear mark where the ball's been going on the inner cage. Because the thing doesn't feel particularly sloppy, I'm inclined to get some extra life out of it. So really it's just a case now, I think, just double check further in there. I've got this little brush here as well, which is very useful for getting in here and cleaning things out. Right, now we can get the paper in there. Push the paper through. This is all hardened steel in it, by the way, so I'm not going to mark it with the tip of a screwdriver. Or I shouldn't be able to mark it with the tip of a screwdriver. Right, that can go over there. Now let's have a look-see. Yeah, I think it's all right. It's part worn. If it's got a fair amount of life left in it, I'm inclined to actually just reuse them. And what can I see down at the bottom here? I could use a degreaser in there, but then I'd have to clean the whole bloody thing out. And at the moment this has got a, looks like a one-shot lube in here, which I don't have a problem with. So long as you're not into your wading, in which case one shot can be a pain because you can't actually drain it out. So if you're into wading, stick with the EP oil. Right, so let's clean that face right up. Yeah, it's barely worn, I'm inclined to suggest. So now we've checked that, we'll pop the ball back in, like that. Rotate the CV joint around, There we go, that can go in. And I can rebuild the rest of the hub. I mean, you've seen, I've done videos of these things before now where I've taken them apart and they've been utterly shagged. I think when you can feel the groove that the ball sits in, then it's past it. But light wear, I really don't have a problem with. Now, these got a make. No, they haven't got a maker's name on them, so they're not the original GKNs, which you can't get anymore. I have seen some of these being sold, which are made out of cheese, and they just wear out. So, but these, they're serviceable. That's all I'm going to say. The only thing I really worry about with the stub axle is the state of the seat that the seal or hub seal goes on against. Make sure it's not painted. Sometimes they are. If there's paint on it, take the paint off. I tend to use the Cortico double-lipped seals, which give them a fighting chance. I mean, there is some wear on this, but again, I can sort of feel it towards the top edge there, but I think that that is, again, serviceable. I think it will work. Now, all I really need to do with this is clean up this face here and put a gasket on it, because it looks like someone's painted it. So it might need to get Mr. Zip wheel on there to get the paint off the gasket face. Don't paint gasket faces, folks. It's pointless, because you just can't get a good seat. Yes, paint. So I can see the remains of a gasket here, which has been put over the top of paint. It's not going to do any favours. Steel to steel. Right, I think I'm going to have to go and get the zip wheel on this just to clean up that face, which I'll do over by the door. And just push these holes through, because there's likely to be some shit in there, which I don't want to be pushing into the threads. Clean out this big brass bush in the middle here that supports the nose of the CV joint. I have checked it for wear, and it appears to be good. There's no real issue with it. I think when you come to change the CV joints, you might want to think about changing those as well. But they don't normally need changing in the middle. Right, I think that is ready for a gasket. That's my gasket box. Which ones are they? They're these ones. They are these ones. Are they these ones? The holes line up. It's a little bit on the tight side, just double check. Joint washer. That one fits better, doesn't it? So these must be for either a Land Rover or the rear. It might be the back end. But this one at the front here, 571 751. How about that? Oh, right, just paint a bit of gloop onto that face. Obviously it's clean, but otherwise you'd need to just degrease the gasket face before you put the gasket on there. You want it clean, you want it dry. Then you put your stag well seal on. Let that just go off a little bit. Wipe the excess off the inside where you just absolutely lathered it all over the place there, Richard. La la la, la 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 la. And then a bit more of this on the swivel housing side of the stub axle. And then I shall bolt this up. Oh yes, right, I can go back on there again. You notice that I've completely ignored my rule there about keeping my hands away from that stuff because it just stains the skin. Right, the only other thing about stub axles is when I put them on, you've got the keyway on there. Have the keyway pointing some direction where you can see it. So if it's right down at the bottom, it becomes less helpful. So I tend to have it pointing at either sort of 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock so I can see it towards the top. Right, I'm going to go and put this on.